everybody. Welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. We're here back in our Flywheel series with me, Robbie, and with
me, Ruth.
Yeah, and so for those who've been following along every episode, this is the sixth in the series. We did one about the coaching business flywheel as a whole, which is my model, which aims to do two things, to really pinpoint what are the 5 things that if you don't do any one of them, you can't have a sustainable coaching business, and also fit those together in a way that kind of helps us have an actual practical approach to building a coaching business. For example, like, what do I do when I want more money in my business? What do I do when I want to work with a different group of people? What do I do when I you want to create more clients? What do I do when I'm trying to decide what training to do? And like all of those things should be helped by the coaching business flywheel. So we did an overarching episode, and then we've done one on each of the 5 things on the flywheel. And we're on the last, the kind of round it. So you can look at it at thecoachesjourney.com. There's a visual of it. There's a free ebook there with some more detail as well. But the idea is there's 5 things, they feed into each other. If you do enough of one, you almost can't help but end up doing enough of the next one. And if you do enough of that, you almost can't help but doing enough of the next thing. And we're round to the last, in some ways, the last part. But of course, it feeds the next part, so it's also, there is no beginning and end, which is working with clients. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to have to talk about a little bit about like the actual work there, but we're going to be mostly thinking of it from the point of view of a business development activity, which is essentially what this is. So the reason it fits into the flywheel is if you work with enough clients, you almost can't help but connect with more people, which is the next thing on the flywheel, via referrals and word of mouth and potentially other ways too. And so we're going to be thinking of it mostly from that point of view, I think, in this conversation.
Okay. Oh, that was a pause. That was a question.
It was this time. Yeah. We're obviously in perfect sync today. Yeah, it wasn't a question. But if I don't pause, then I'll just talk for 30 minutes about this stuff.
But I wasn't feeling like I needed to interrupt you, so that's probably good.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so no, you don't have to. Don't manufacture an interruption.
Okay, all right.
Or have you got one now?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I think that we just had a really great conversation just before we switched on the recording, and I had a new insight. Like, I think that one of the strange things, so we think at the Coach's Journey when we created a vision for after the first kind of 3-4 years of it, we created a vision for the next 5 years. And the center of that really is, how do we make sure that everyone with the potential for doing amazing coaching actually gets to do amazing coaching? And how do we stop people quitting coaching because the business of coaching feels too hard or too confusing or whatever it is? And I actually think like there's a kind of weird thing, which is that the way that coach training organizations train the business of coaching is somehow not sufficient, despite the fact that I know many people, smart people who work in those companies who have thought about this a lot. And for example, Barefoot, where you trained, did a very cool looking thing for their students, the name of which I've forgotten. You know
what the course to do after you've done the coaching training with them about how you set up in business, really.
Well, no, there was like a set of interviews, maybe, but there was also, I think, a set of interviews with interesting Barefoot alumni about how they'd grown their business, and then a kind of group experience alongside that, which I thought looked great and a little bit like this podcast. But so there's also a little bit, every time someone does something like you, it's always a little bit sad in case they're doing it much better. But mostly, I think there isn't enough support for coaches, which is why something like the Coach's Journey exists through the coach training providers with how you actually run a coaching business. But the bit that they do really well, right, mostly, is teach you how to work with clients. So I think first and foremost here, one of the crucial rules to remember is trust your coaching, right, and then grow your capacity to do great coaching. So there's those 2 things together. Continue to learn and grow. And when you're working with clients, the question really is, how do I do the best work I can? So because it's still somewhat mysterious to me how word of mouth businesses work, right? I think I've said this elsewhere, but I've had clients where I didn't feel like the work was that transformational, who gave me amazing testimonials and who have referred a bunch of people to me. And some of the people where I know, and they have told me, the work was life-changing or really transformational have never referred, to my knowledge, referred somebody to me, i.e. the person has never got as far as contacting me. They may have told, for all I know, they've told 100 people, but they've never got to me. And so that's all somewhat mysterious. But I think, so one of the things I do when something's mysterious is it's probably a really complex thing where like everything influences itself. And one of my favorite questions for complexity is from the book The One Thing by Gary Keller. And what he says is, what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So we can zoom that in. We can say, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else about my clients leading to referrals becomes easier and or unnecessary? The one thing is coach them as well as you possibly can, right? The better an experience they have, that would seem to make everything else either easier or at best unnecessary. If they have a totally transformational experience, that people are likely to be asking them what's happened to them, and therefore at that point they'll kind of have to refer people to you as a coach, right? So it's worth saying a few things about how to do that, and then we can talk a little bit about some of the other practical stuff that we might do about referrals. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
So,
just what came up was like, it goes back again to that you can't help but.
Yeah.
Because if you are doing loads of shit hot coaching, then yeah, that person who you had amazing impact with, gave them loads of insight, it might seem like they've not referred anybody, but the more you do like that, feeds into that you can't help but.
It does feel like that, doesn't it? It really does to me. Like I think I was saying to you at some point, I was definitely saying it to somebody, one of the host team, I got this like idea. I think this would be a cool thing to do. Like, I think there's a bit of research that probably is needed, like not academic research, into how referrals work. Like I've got this idea that I want at some point to hire somebody, because it'll be easier if somebody else does this, to go back, contact all my old clients and basically ask them, do you ever refer people to Robbie? Do you even remember who he is? Like, what, if you do, why do you? And if you don't, this is the crucial question that I'm interested in, what would incentivize you to do so? For example, for me, it would be really good value to pay somebody £250 for every one-to-one client that came to me. That would be great value for me. If it got me even one more client a year, that would make a lot of difference, right? Would that make all the difference? I had this conversation with my wife and she was like, I think it would to me. And I was like, come on, mate. We're supposed to be in this together. You should be referring people to me all the time. But it's interesting, like, right, to be asking what makes the difference for that word of mouth thing to work. But every time I slow down to think about it, when I ask that one thing question, it does feel like the better the work you're doing, you almost can't help but have more of a coaching business, almost can't help but have those connections coming in. And then we can ask, and we should ask, does a financial incentive work? Does reminding people work? What works to help that happen? Because I do think it's true. I had a conversation with my brother who works at Coaches Rising about this. I was like, why have you never run a why don't you have a business development program? And he gave a few answers. It's tricky. They tried one once, didn't work that well. Who do you trust? All that kind of thing. Who are the genuine thought leaders on that? How does it happen? But he also centered in on, but I think that, 80% of having a sustainable coaching business is, are you really good at coaching? And that's the thing that they, as a training organization, are doing. And so then if we think about that, there are, probably like 3 or 4 really valuable things to be doing as a coach that help you do great coaching. One is doing training. There are a million coach training organizations out there, so you have to do some due diligence, but you can listen to this show and hear about, go back through the back episodes. You'll hear about loads and loads of different things that people have trained in. All of them will be useful for doing better work, and the good ones, if you do the due diligence, will help you grow as a person and deepen your experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've thought, and I'm very interested in the ideas around deliberate practice, which is this idea, the kind of Malcolm Gladwell popularized it a bit, which is that geniuses aren't born, they're made by, long practice. So he had this idea of 10,000 hours, which, as I understand it, is a little bit misreading the research, but that everyone who looks like a genius, whether it's Mozart or Messi or, whoever else it might be, Beyonce, they are all just actually people who have practiced extraordinarily more than most of us have done.
Mm.
Now, not all practices are equal, but i.e., we've all done. If you drive, you've probably done 10,000 hours of driving by the time you're 40, but you aren't as good at driving as the leading Formula One drivers because they are practicing in a different way. So there are some crucial ingredients. Now, it happens, as far as I can tell, mentor coaching basically is this for coaches. It's like a structured thing. If you're doing it with somebody who's qualified or has paid attention, or read the ICF guidelines, which forces you to pay really close attention to what you're doing, which is very likely to improve what you're doing. And so that's mentor coaching as a distinction from supervision, which we'll talk about in a sec. Mentor coaching is watching or listening to somebody coach, reflecting on it. Could be you, could be somebody else, reflecting on it and learning from that.
Mm.
And that is like a very powerful way to learn about coaching.
Yeah.
Essentially, when you read the deliberate, I had thought about this. I read one of the books. I think it was Bounce by Matthew Syed. The Gladwell one is Outliers. I was like, I'm convinced by your book, Matthew Syed. So what does it mean for me? And it centered me on mentor coaching at that point as my way to really upgrade my coaching. Listening to yourself, listening to others.
When I finished my training, me and another person who I trained with, we did mentor coaching with each other.
Very cool.
So we'd coach each other, record it, then go and watch it separately, and then come back and feedback.
Yeah, so good.
But I trained with Barefoot, and a lot of my basically that is the majority of your training with Barefoot is coaching, watching coaching, or being coached.
And if we go back to the ideas in the inner game of tennis, which kind of, for people who don't know, formed the Grow model, comes from that book. He's really clear in that, and he feels right to me that really how we learn is not instructional. It's by watching people and practicing, right? And so that's why, like, his thing is, well, there's that great Miles Downey story. When we talk to Miles on the podcast, I kind of tell it or make him tell it in both his appearances. He coaches people on golf. It tells a story in one of his books, coaching people on golf, but he's never played golf. He doesn't know how to play it, but because he's helping them pay really close attention to what they're doing and what changes each time, they improve massively. And so mentor coaching is definitely a way to do that. Supervision, i.e. looking at the tricky moments in coaching, is or the things we don't know how to deal with, things we wish we dealt with better. Another really powerful way of building our confidence, but also upgrading our skills.
The other side of that, supervision isn't just about what was difficult or what went wrong. It's about celebrating what went well and recognizing what you're doing well.
Yeah. And these things are all part of it, right? Because, so for example, I did a lot of my mentor coaching with Katie Harvey, who's I've been on the show a few times. We'll put a link to one of her appearances in the show notes, or you can just search that. Actually, she's a great example of this thing we're talking about, because the whole time I've known her, she's had a website saying, my website is coming soon. And I've known her for nearly 10 years now. So she has no marketing. She does nothing. And yet her business is busy. Far more. She makes definitely more money than I do. I don't know how public that is, but plenty more money than I do, as I understand it. Although that says something about my money as well. But she doesn't have any marketing. It's all running by word of mouth and by various other ways that she gets connected to people potentially. She does some work, for example, supervising coaches at the London Business School. So that's a way of creating insight for people, doing the other things on the flywheel, connecting with people, all that kind of thing. But a group mentor coaching, group experiences as a coach are also really powerful. So you can do group supervision, you can do group mentor coaching, you can join the Coach's Journey community. These are ways where you can be learning faster because more people are involved. For example, the Coach's Journey community, like I learned loads from, it's modeled on the way that Rich Litvin worked with coaches. We've talked about him plenty in this series, but the way I experienced him working. And then as I've done more group experiences with Katie, with Robert Holden, with other people we've talked about on the series, I've adapted my approach. But, what I love about it is you get to watch in an experience like that. I get to, you when you remember, get to watch me coaching as well as learning from what the client is going through. When Katie's, I learned so much from Katie's group supervision, particularly because one week there'd been a diary mistake and she wasn't there, we'd had a, and the feel of the, she's an interesting coach. I would have said before that moment, she did very little. And yet when she wasn't there, the whole call was different. I
Mm.
felt completely different in my experience of that call. So much less safe, so much less like in a learning environment. And it taught me something really important about what it's like, what it means, and how you create a space for people. So we can learn so much from watching others. There's way more coaching on YouTube than there used to be. There's some of me on the coachesjourney.com videos page. But so much coaching you can watch and get access to now. There are podcasts of it. There's all kinds of things which are like, really good ways to learn. And then one of the crucial things to do is at some points in it, pause it when something interesting happens and think, as a coach, what would I do here? That's one of the deliberate practice ways to be really encoding it into your intuition. Because how this in the end is going to work is that all this stuff is going to pile into your intuition so that when you're faced with a client, your intuition is going to tell you, I think the right thing to do here is that weird thing that I saw Swale do on that Coach's Journey community call once. Or actually, I'm going to channel my inner Katie Harvey here. I'm going to stay way out of this. I'm just going to be here with this person now and going to just see what happens.
Mm.
So there's probably one more thing I want to say about.
I've got things too.
Oh yeah. Do you want to do some?
Yeah, because I think there's lots of ways that we as coaches can support each other.
Nice.
And obviously with the Coach's Journey community, we also support each other outside of that. But I know a couple of fab coaches, Gary Buxton in Manchester, he organises a walking circle. It's him and somebody else, I think. I don't want to upset anybody. Where coaches get together on a Friday afternoon and walk and talk. And also Ruth Richards down in Bournemouth, I think, has started one or has joined one. And I just think that is really fruitful.
Yeah. I need to add in, of course, you may or may not know this, but those walks both inspired by Speech Marks Claire Pedrick, her walk in the Malverns. But that walk originated in a conversation where I was also present. And at the very least, I was doing Katie Harvey holding perfect space for great ideas to emerge. But I think it was mostly Claire's idea. But yeah, so that we can put some links to those. There's a LinkedIn group if people want to be part of that. Really it's about, in this respect, it's about getting all the support you can, from all the places, all the learning you can, especially when you're starting out. How do you make it really practical? Requires courage. Like, I notice I still have resistance. I'm not doing mentor coaching at the moment. I still have resistance to like, I have to record sessions. I have to share them with people. That's despite the fact there are a bunch of sessions of mine on YouTube that people can watch all the time. And some of them are from a long time ago. And I'd like to think my coaching is way better since then. But of course, I don't know.
But also, like, obviously, I have a background in education and we talk a lot about reflective practice. And I think making sure you have time in your calendar for reflection is really important. I tend to do most of my reflection walking by the canal. But I know when I first started, I used to use Julie Starr's reflection form that I don't even think you need to buy the coaching manual. You can just go to her website and download it. And that was really helpful. But I think just, making a conscious effort to reflect.
Yeah, and we talked last time about the values from a sales point of view and an integrity point of view of hiring a coach for yourself. Most of the places that I've done my reflection have been in my coaching over the years. I mean, especially in the first probably 4 or 5 years, that was where it mostly happened. These days, the good thing about doing this stuff is it's an investment. So early on, I needed loads of support. As time goes on, you get more experience. You get more experience at two things. One, at dealing with the stuff that comes up. And two, at thinking this stuff through on your own.
Yeah.
So like I am much better at understanding how I run my business, thinking about people and working out, okay, that's what happened. What would I do next time? But when I was starting out and stuff went wrong, I would be like, one of my coaching trainers, I remember him like calling me back at 10:30 at night once because he could kind of feel that from the WhatsApp message. I think he'd been somewhere, but he could feel also like, oh, I probably need to like, this probably really help Robbie if we can talk about this before he tries to get to sleep tonight. So it's like, because these things really affect us when we're, especially early on, because it matters to us so much.
Yeah. And I think as well, going back, sorry,
No, that's good.
what you're talking about, having a coach, how you learn. And again, it takes me back to education. You know, I was once told teaching is stealing, as in stealing ideas from other teachers, students. And I think it's very much like that with coaching. And the beauty of working with a coach who's further along from you is there's plenty of stuff you can steal. And then you steal it and you change it and it becomes your own. But I also think there's no shame in that. You know, that is development. That is becoming a better coach.
Exactly. You're so right. Because I actually didn't even have hiring a coach on the list of things for this episode. But now we're talking about it. Yeah, especially those early coaches that I would just steal like, we're so obsessed at the start often with like, what's the right question to ask? Well, you learn that. The best way to learn that is you get asked a killer question. And then within 2 weeks, undoubtedly, if you're coaching enough, you'll be presented with an opportunity to ask that question. You'll just try it. And sometimes it won't work for you, but in the way that it worked for the coach you were working with, Katie or Joel or Rich in my case, or Mike, but sometimes it will, and then you'll start having your own flavor on it. And again, you'll be training your intuition.
Yeah, training. Yeah,
to kind of know how to do this stuff skillfully. So there are probably like. It's probably like one major more thing just for people to be thinking about. Well, actually, no, two. I've just thought of another. But they're both linked. So I would say that a big shift for me was, or the kind of two shifts that they're connected, but they're not the same. More presence and more boldness in my coaching.
More presence and more boldness.
Exactly. So these will often make a big upgrade. So presence, you can think about it in a bunch of ways. All these things we're talking about will help. The greater the confidence, the less you're in your head, the more you're there with the client, the better experience they'll have. But you can also create a practice, a presencing practice, a meditation, a reflection to do before a coaching call. I used to do 2 over a kind of 10-minute period before most coaching sessions. So that's one practical thing to put in. Really, every coach should do that. What you're practicing there, especially starting out, just start practicing now. And then in 5 years, you'll be super grateful that you've been practicing it for 5 years. You're just practicing getting into presence ahead of being with somebody. And you'll get faster at it in the end, but you won't notice that happening until, for me, it was like 5 years in. For various reasons, I started running coaching sessions closer to each other, having less time for that. And I was like, oh, it doesn't seem to be making a massive difference for me anymore. Because I think I'm just better at being present. So I don't need to do as much work to quieten my thoughts before the call.
Yeah.
The second one, boldness.
Oh, yeah. Just on that then, just on presence.
Yeah.
I keep needing to find which one it is. It's Jim Dethmer. And I think it might be him on Coaches Rising podcast. And he talks about, when you lose presence in a session, how to come back.
Mm.
And it's the 3 A's, but I can never remember what they are. I think it's like, it's acknowledge that you've lost presence, accept, and then I can't remember what the third one is. It's obviously going back to the session. And that sounds like such a long process, but I can do that in a split second.
Yeah.
And usually for me, it's, just taking a deep breath. And I quite like to make sure my feet are flat on the floor and my hands are flat on the desk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
nice.
But it's just reiterating what you were saying, that at first feels a bit clunky, but then it just becomes like second nature if I notice that I've ended up thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, a crucial insight in this, there's an article on the coach's journey called Recommitting is the Journey. We'll put something like that. We'll put a link to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it tells a story about that recommitting is one of the crucial ingredients of change. And I learned it from a Tim Ferriss idea, which is that the rep, so he's interested in the gym. So the rep is like lifting the weight, right? That's the thing that grows. It's not holding the weight high mostly. That's the thing you're doing. It's lifting it. That's what makes you stronger and able to lift more weight. And that in the analogy in meditation is that bringing your attention back is the rep that enables you to hold the attention more. So what normally happens is, lose my focus on my client, think, fuck, I'm a terrible coach. I was never meant to be here. This person probably knows that am I bored? Like, what's going on for me? I'm a fraud. How can this possibly be happening? And of course, anyone hearing that knows, well, like the question is, does that help you come back to presence? Of course not. Suddenly you're less present, way less present than you were before. Now the client probably is noticing it because you're kind of going red if you're me, you're going red in the face, or like you're kind of looking panicked or going white, whatever it is. That's not helpful, right? So we have to accept that our attention will drift. And remember that by bringing it back to the person in front of us, or if we're doing the practice beforehand, to our breath, to the mantra we're saying, whatever it might be, the bringing it back is the rep which will enable us to hold our focus more in the future. And so less blame and more just like you or Detmer said, accept or acknowledge and accept. Even if you don't remember the third A, like, it doesn't matter. If you acknowledge and accept,
no, it doesn't matter.
Once you accept what's actually here in the moment, which is, oh yeah, I started thinking about dinner. Yeah, cool. I mean, a very bold coach, later on, when you're feeling super confident, you can say,
yeah, might go, actually,
oh, my attention just drifted there. I sometimes say this. Sorry about that. That would be one thing. Or like, and sometimes the person will say, because I love doing that, because it's like, I'm going to tell you when my attention drifts, which is my way of saying, every time I don't tell you this, you've got all my presence. Right. But the other side of it is sometimes they'll say, yeah, my attention's shifting a bit as well. Maybe we're not on the right thing today. So I want to say a quick boldness thing, which is that I read a great book called The Meaning Revolution by Fred Kaufman. And one of the things he says in that is that he has a question or a challenge to himself. So there's a beautiful part in it based on the Buddhist, the Zen idea of die before you die so that you can truly live. And he says in that he, I can we can put a little article to one of my articles about that as well. In that book, he says I don't know if he always does this, but something like he goes into his coaching sessions with the challenge to himself, what if this is the last time I will ever get to coach this person? And of course it could be, right?
Good. Yeah.
Because sometimes people die. Sometimes people just ghost their coach. Sometimes a budget gets pulled. Sometimes, someone gets ill and you don't get to do the last session that you thought you were going to do when you thought you were going to do it. And then time drags on and it never happens, right? So all these things are possible. The first time I did that, it was amazing, right? I had this client where it was getting a little boring in some ways. We were getting a little mundane, and we were actually getting the thing that I think really changed was we were getting a little chummy. We'd been working together for like a year and a bit, I think, by this point. And his company had paid for a 2-year contract, so it was a really fascinating engagement. And I just read Kaufman, and I turned up for my coaching with this guy, and we did no small talk, basically, like a tiny bit, like a pinch of small talk, but really none. And then we were straight into it. It's like, what if this is the last time I ever speak to this guy? And then it reinvigorated that coaching completely. And the crucial thing here is that all of us are more skilled at coaching than our egos will let us be in the moment. Yeah. And the beautiful thing about that is die before you die isn't that you die, right? It's let your ego die so that you can really live. I mean, ego, I don't know. Let your kind of the beliefs you have that hold you back die in this moment, right? Just trust yourself more, trust the world more, trust the universe, trust the client. Let's do this as though there wasn't going to be a tomorrow, because maybe there won't be.
Also, I'm interested, like, you could pose that as an idea to a client, couldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if this is our last session together?
Yeah.
You just said something, trust. What did you say? Trust. I'd written down trust and then I got waylaid.
That's probably all you need.
Yeah, trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we can get, and I touched on this in one of the previous episodes about kind of getting bogged down with I need to add value. I need to get, it's insight, wasn't it, when we talk about insight? I need to see them have that aha moment. And like you say, just trust.
Yeah.
Because you might not see it but it doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
Yeah, and I mean, what I've found is that that challenge, what if this is the last conversation we'll ever have, doesn't actually create scarcity. So it could. So you got to be careful with it because some people, like I like to bring that sense of mortality into my work when I can with clients, with groups. Some people, it really panics, because of who they are and what they've come. So if that challenge to you as a coach makes you think, that means it's the last one, I've got to create even more value than normal, then you just let that challenge go, ignore this last 2 minutes of this conversation. But for most people, it actually removes all of that because all of that is desperation that this person will come back for the next session, will pay you again, will tell their friends about your coaching, all those things. Will not hate you for charging them money for this thing, which is just having a conversation, asking questions. How that weird? Must create value, otherwise, most of that goes out the window when you think, I'm just with this person. I just want to help them as much as I can because we might never get to do this again. And it's absolutely sacred that we get to do it. It's a true privilege. It gets us into that place instead of the kind of desperation. So I think before we finish this thing, we should do a little bit of like the practical of this. So because there's two things that have to happen here, right? We have to do this amazing work, but then there are, and like, you and said, or about Coaches Rising, or we've been saying 80, maybe more % of work with clients as a business development tool is work with clients as well as you possibly can. Get bold, get out of your head, get present, do the training, do the learning, all that kind of stuff. And then there's still this little bit of what else can we do to enable more connections to happen? So this is like, we haven't done this explicitly with many of the other episodes, but there's kind of two things. There's a thing we can track, like, are we working with clients? If we're working with clients, then, so for example, one of the ways I think is every client I work with is a seed planted for the future. In fact, the only thing we talked about tracking a few times in this series, the only thing that I have consistently tracked is my coaching hours, by which, because I judge that by that, for every hour coached, it's more likely that my business is going to be successful in the future. Because every client is a seed planted, they may come back, they may tell somebody, they're certainly adding to my experience. So, and then there's a question, are there any other things we can do to make it more likely that people connect people to us more? So is it all right if I jump into a few of those?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so if I ask myself that one thing question again, after we've, so with the one thing, it's good to know what the first thing is. But if you're a bit greedy like me, once you've started doing everything you can to make that happen, you want to know what's the next thing. So if I'm doing the best coaching I can, I've got in my practice to do that as well as I can, then what's the one thing I can do such that those people refer more people to me that makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And where I get to with that really is tell everyone I work with at least once, or tell everyone I work with once that I would like some referrals. Right? That makes everything else easier or unnecessary. We need to just make sure that they know that my business works by word of mouth. Mike Toller, who we had on the podcast once, I don't know if he still does, put a link to that. He used to have a thing in his signature which said something like, his email signature, something like, I can't remember what it was. I'm always incredibly grateful to the clients who tell people about my work. Or some of my clients love my work so much that they tell their friends and family about me. Something like that. Just a constant reminder that that is a thing. So I think that's worth saying. Another thing is...
and I noticed on your email that you've put a little thing about what people say about working with me.
Yeah. So I guess that's another thing, right? Testimonials are a way to drive this, right? You can ask people. So one of the things to think about is, do our clients know how powerful coaching is? And what do we, for them, even if it's been life-changing? One of the things I think we can do to help this business work is help people understand the power of the work they've done. We can do that thing we talked about in the last episode. Ask them at the end of sessions, what's been most useful? We can have a structure at the end. And there's a video on the videos pages of the Coach's Journey about creating a powerful end to a coaching engagement. We can ask them big questions.
And
at
the
that
Kim
point.
Morgan episode's great for that as well.
Yeah, we talk about that kind of thing there, don't we? And so, we can do this thing where we help people realize that it's been a powerful experience. And one of the ways to do that is ask them to reflect on it. Ask them to, I do it before the last session of every engagement, but I also ask people to write testimonials. And I imagine that triggers things. And yeah, I basically decided I got some advice that it was, you want to put your testimonials more front and center. So there's a little link in my email now saying, read what people say about working with me or something like that. There's a testimonials page on my website now. I've structured that slightly differently to enable me to use them a bit more skillfully. I kind of updated my testimonials recently to kind of focus a little bit more on the kind of people I want to be doing more work with in the future, so that if someone a bit like them lands on my website, they'll kind of read that. I think it is definitely worth saying that it's somewhat mysterious to me, this referrals thing. As I've said, I think there's like interesting research to do here.
Mysterious as in you can't always track it and you don't know when they do, but it doesn't mean they haven't.
Yeah, exactly. And just that it's not super obvious when and why it would happen. And that's why we've got to stay in that flywheel complexity fit language. What are the things that if I do them enough, I almost can't help but have more people connected? So tell every client that you'd like referrals, right? That's a thing that helps keep people warm. So again, if we use that kind of sales language, like, so if there's a client that's worked with you before, stay in touch with them somehow. We talked about connect, right? This is another way, I guess, the flywheel links, right? Once you've worked with somebody, they're a person you can always connect with.
Yeah, and I always revisit clients 6 months later.
Yeah, that's a cool practice. Did you get that from me, or did you design that separately?
I know, I got that from Andy Chandler at Barefoot.
Nice. So one of my old colleagues, Nina, she designed it because it came out of supervision. She was like, I've got this like personal thing where I want to know how clients are doing 6 months on, but that doesn't feel like a good way to, like a good integrity, at peace with myself way to kind of just hassle my former clients. And with her supervisor, they designed a thing which was like, oh, a cool thing to offer every client is a 6 months on check-in. Everyone's grateful for that, and it'll solve your problem. And it's good business development. Because in some ways, the most likely new clients are the people we've worked with before. So it gives us a pool of people to always be connecting with. But it is useful. I would say that is useful for two reasons. So when I did a bunch of, I hadn't been doing that practice of Nina or Andy's for a long time, and so I caught up end of last year. It was lovely, and it led to some work. I think so I caught up with I can't remember, I offered 10 or 15 clients a coaching session, and probably did somewhere between 5 and 10. And of those, there's only one person who became a client then, but actually another one has just got in touch about 6 months later. And it feels to me like if you do that enough, you almost can't help but have them refer people to you, because you'll be front of mind, right? So one of the questions is, how do you get front of mind?
Yeah, that's it. You're in people's heads more than.
Yeah. Phil Bolton, he kind of identified the people that were referring people to him, and he would go out for coffee with them, just specifically them. So that's an interesting thing, if you can track who's coming from where. And then the last thing to say, I think we haven't talked about this really at all in this thing, which tells you who we are. But it is, one of the crucial questions that we get asked all the time by new coaches is something about niching, which is fascinating, right? Or if you're in North America, niches. There's a lot of nonsense said about coaches having to have a niche in which they work.
You've got to have a niche, apparently. You can't possibly market without it.
Exactly, but we only need one example, and we've got one because we've talked about her already. Katie Harvey never even had a website in the time I've known her, but also coaches literally anyone on anything and has a very successful business. So you definitely don't have to have one. But if we think about the referral stage, if we think about anything that you get told, this is a good use of the coaching business flywheel, right? Anything that you get told you have to do as a coach, a good check on that is, A, is it in the flywheel? But B, and almost certainly it won't be, except the things that are in the flywheel. But if you find something that is, let us know, because we'll update the flywheel. But almost certainly it won't be. But what you'll find instead is mostly it would be a thing that would be helpful to you to do successfully the things that are on the flywheel. So that's what a niche is, right? It's not that you have to have it, but it helps you with knowing who to connect with. It helps you with creating insight. And it helps you with this stage, right? If you know, for example, I get a lot of referrals for my work with coaches, because coaches talk to other coaches, they know the podcast. It's very specifically targeted at a particular group of people, at a
Yeah.
niche, and word of mouth happens there all the time, right? And it doesn't happen as much in my other work, I think, because the niche is less clear. So what we want, the ideal situation, right, is I think is you want a former client of yours, if we're talking about this episode, to be having a conversation with somebody, and they tell your former client their situation, and the client says, "This is a referral, right? Do you know who you should talk to? You should talk to Ruth." And if we think about what are the things that help that person do that, what can we do to enable them to do that? It's to be really clear on who we'd love to be connected with. Now, I don't think you should go to that place artificially. I don't think new coaches should force themselves into it. We don't want to use another Jim Detmer frame. We don't want our niche to be happening to us, right? We want it to be created by us. And the only time I don't think know enough about themselves or coaching or who they work with to create a niche accurately at the start. So you can afford to give yourself time, but if you know it, it can be really powerful for this stage in the flywheel.
Yeah, because it gives you language, doesn't it, to use in when you approach people, when you're talking about what you're doing. So a lot of the work I do is with female emerging leaders or female leaders. So quite often when people ask me what I do, I will talk about that work.
Yeah. And then you're in that. Then it's easy for them to make the connections straight away. Easier.
And when I'm approaching other people or especially businesses or organizations, that is how I talk about my work. But that doesn't mean that I don't do anything else.
Right. So, yeah, you're creating, again, both in choosing your niche, because I know a bit about how you did that, but also in using your niche, neither in those places you're becoming a victim of the niche, which is what we have to be really careful of. Because you're still saying, yeah, I have this niche, but also the right non-female leader, so female that's not a leader, non-female person comes along, you're not going to turn them away necessarily. Or the right one comes along, then you won't, I guess.
So I'm conscious of time now.
Yeah.
And one thing I really want to say is regarding working with clients, you can only take your clients as deep as you have been yourself.
Yeah, that has always felt true to me. Who did you learn that from? Do you remember? Or has it just been present for you?
I think possibly Jackie on my barefoot course, but
so it could have been Jackie Holder. She's definitely done a lot of work on herself. I learned that hearing you interview her. She's definitely learned an enormous amount about herself, about what she's been through, from the training she's done, from the kind of coaches and mentors she's had. It's a wonderful thing, that, to me, because it makes all the things I want to do, which is understand myself more, be different, be able to cope with life better, be stressed less, be anxious less, all those things that I would just love to happen in my life. It makes them a business development activity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's extra clear that all the training you do, all the books you read, all the coaching you have, all the mentoring you have is a business expense for all of you listening.
Yeah. And attached to that, in my good old, sweary way, I just feel like know your shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Read the books, listen to the podcasts. It is like an ongoing passion and drive for me. And I guess that is because I want to know myself better. I want to be less stressed, less anxious, all the things you've just said. And that is a lot of the beauty of this work for me, is that seeking and finding new things, new ideas, new concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the rhythm of these things will change over time, everything on the flywheel. As part of so for members of the Coaches Journey community, the last few years, we've run an in-person workshop. And for the one this year, I basically designed I called it the flywheel of life, because I thought that was funny. It's not actually a good name for the thing, but it's essentially using a way to assess yourself against the things, these things on the coaching business flywheel. And whenever I'm running a workshop with some exercises, I always want to make sure I've done all the exercises. And it was interesting. This was the one where when I looked at it, essentially one of the questions I was asking that anyone listening can ask is something like, how close are you to the fulfillment of your potential along these 5 activities, the 5 activities on the flywheel? How close are you to your potential in the way you do each of these things? And I realized that for working with clients, at many times in my coaching business, I could have said, I am at 10 out of 10 here. I am learning so much. I am being stretched. I am taking all of that live, the things I've learned last week, I'm already bringing to my clients. And it's not true for me at the moment. It was a really nice thing to notice. It's like, okay, some of the other ones, like I'm still right up against in the 8s, 9s, and 10s. This one, I can't remember what I scored myself at, 5, 6, 7. But it's really lovely to notice that and go, oh, okay, yeah. I'm not like, and it's interesting because as you go on with this stuff, like I need a different type of learning now to what I needed before. Every coaching book before would teach me some new things, or would teach me, in fact, 100 new things. Whereas now, if I'm reading an intro to coaching book, I'm going to learn a few new things and they're going to make some difference. But given who I am and who I've been and this podcast and all that kind of thing, I know a lot about the basics of coaching. So now I have to look for different things that'll take my work to another level, to do different, deeper work on myself. And I have to find the frameworks, the ideas that enable me to work with clients in even more powerful ways. And again, for most of us, that's why we came, right? To do this really meaningful work. But you said it, like, know your shit. And also that great thing, I quoted it in a different episode, great bit of my interview with Neil McKinnon on the podcast. When you're stepping into the hallowed ground of coaching, show up, right? Don't do what you can to not be distracted in these calls, in these meetings, because this is how your business will work. And this is why you were here in the first place. So yeah, we want to have just enough pressure on ourselves, but not too much, to be in the moment with people, to be doing everything we can to be delivering a strong and powerful experience whenever we're coaching, because every coaching conversation that we ever have is a work with clients on the flywheel. That's why I track all of them, the free ones, the paid ones, the official ones, the unofficial ones, the ones as part of training. They all count, right, towards working with clients. And for every one of those, it's that little bit more likely that some new person is put into your life. And when they're put into your life via some amazing work you've done with people, they are far closer to being that warmed up person ready to accept your offer when you say, this is how I work, this is how much it costs, and this is how to pay me. So the people we get as referrals are often a far more exciting prospect than the random person off the street.
Yeah. Well, that feels like an awesome place to finish.
It does. So thanks so much, Ruth, for being with me on this series. I said right at the start of it that I think I said right when the host team came on board that it would be like one of the things I was really looking forward to was never doing a solo episode ever again, because it was exhausting. And each of the times we've done this, I've left it feeling full of energy, and that's usually a good signal that the people listening will have some good energy too.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. And I've learnt loads.
Same.
And I've had quite a few insights regarding my own business. Yeah.
And look, all of this for me is a part of, the models of the flywheel was launched earlier this year. It's part of really testing it, is to really explore this thinking, to deep dive more, to use it, to understand it, to find the flaws and bits that are less clear. And if people want more, there's plenty of places to find that. We've talked about them across the series. thecoachesjourney.com is full of resources. The podcast is a treasure trove of ways to work with clients in more interesting and powerful ways,
really is.
And to think about your business in different ways. There are videos on thecoachesjourney.com. There's the free ebook, an introduction to the coaching business flywheel, the Coaches Journey community, the booster pack if you want to be really grounded in email templates and flowcharts of the nuts and bolts of how this works. There's lots of support out there. And I think, underneath it all, we've done this because this whole thing, i.e. coaches not quitting, and people doing the work they're capable of, we really believe that's important. So I hope everyone out, on the basis of this series is able to work with a few more clients and create a little more insight.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome thought, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, Robbie here, and just a few quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. Thanks for getting all the way to the end of this episode. I'm imagining that means you think the work we're doing at The Coach's Journey is important and valuable, and we think so too. And that's why I want to tell you about a way to support The Coach's Journey and get coaching from me and be part of an amazing group of coaches. That is, join The Coach's Journey community. It's my flexible, affordable group coaching program for coaches. You pay either £20 or £100 a month, get access to a certain number of group coaching calls a year, plus some one-to-one time with me if you're a full member, and various other benefits. And now's a great time to join. And that's because the November call, which happens on the 26th of November this year at 5 p.m. UK time, is open to Diamond members, which means you can join for £20 and come along to that call. And if it's not right for you, then you can just cancel afterwards. That's what makes it flexible, affordable, no hard feelings. But in exchange for that £20, you'll get connected to some other amazing coaches. You'll get 2 hours packed with insight, reflections, a chance to be coached, watch coaching. And it's a really enriching experience and a great way to put some money into your coaching business, into your professional development. So we hope we'll see you on the 26th with us. It'd be lovely to meet you there. You can find out more about the community and join at thecoachesjourney.com/community. Loads of testimonials and things there too. If that's not right for you, you can also become a supporter of the podcast and give us financial support and get various other benefits. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/thecoachesjourney. And if neither of those is right for you right now, please do click subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. Leave a review. That makes us do a little happy dance and also makes a real difference to us being able to continue to keep the show free and keep it going. Thanks so much to everyone who has supported The Coach's Journey over the years, but in particular, thank you to Alex Whitten, Alison Malone, David Norris, Jessica Jam, Joey Owen, Linda Ransom, Lucy Braun, and Alan Bedding for your ongoing support. Thank you too for listening, and we hope to have you back with us on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.